you talk to me about windmills.
Yes, windmills. And you know as well as I that it'll take a miracle to get the water up on that north section, and Fairbanks Windmill might be it.
During Bonanza's peak, Pernell Roberts decided to leave. Without hesitation, he declined NBC's offer of $10,500 per episode, which was a considerable sum in 1965. Roberts disappeared from the Hollywood scene while his co-stars became multimillionaires. For years, he had been feuding with producers behind the scenes. Since his character never matured, he deemed the program childish and despised it. Up until recently, no one knew the actual reason he left. It had nothing to do with money. Hollywood intended to keep a secret that involves civil rights, blacklisting, and the horrifying truth buried forever. Waycross, Georgia, was the site of Pernell Roberts' birth on May 18, 1928. His birth occurred at the height of the Great Depression, and he spent his formative years in abject poverty. Over 60% of the farms around him had been foreclosed by the time he was 5 years old. His father, who had aspirations of practicing medicine, instead became a door-to-door salesman for Dr. Pepper. His weekly salary was a meager $7.85, or around $143 in today's AUD. Every day, little Pernell had to go more than a mile to get water, since their log home lacked running water. The town's unemployment rate hit over 42% in 1932 and 1934, forcing his family to depend on food stamps. The sight of 78 Klan members marching through his village on July 11, 1939, when he was 11 years old, was the defining moment of his life. His dedication to civil rights activism began with that horrific sight. Even though his mom had 3 jobs and would stay up until 2 in the morning, Pernell would wait outside the factory to make sure she got home safely. His perseverance and the fierce, unwavering guy he became were both molded by that type of adversity. He found solace in music, nevertheless. At the tender age of 13, he stumbled upon a shattered tuba in a junkyard in 1941. He trained himself to play it, the French horn, the sousaphone, and 5 different kinds of drums in under 3 months. Around the time he was 15, he had mastered 11 different instruments. He went so far as to play in the local USO club for the troops, able to imitate intricate songs with only a single listen. His hand was shattered in an accident in 1944. He would not accept the doctor's prediction that his chances of restoring full usage were only 7%. He instead regained his strength by practicing for 14 hours every day. By March of 1945, he had mastered Chopin's most challenging piano works. In addition to being a performer, he was also a songwriter. The Atlanta Symphony performed one of his own compositions, Southern Lament, among 14 that were mentioned in his high school yearbook. The training at Juilliard was excessively regimented, that he declined a full scholarship offer in 1946. Despite being too young to join the military, Pernell devoted himself fully to helping the cause. He planned a musical revue that brought in $837, equivalent to over $1,400 in today's money, for war bonds just 2 days after Pearl Harbor. From 1942 to 1945, he cycled roughly 30 miles to reach military posts while performing at 247 USO events. The War Department covertly engaged him in August 1944, when he was 16 years old, to perform for injured soldiers and even German prisoners of war at Camp Gordon. Psychologists in the military found that his programs aided in the healing process for seriously wounded service members. He adamantly refused to exit the stage on March 11, 1945, while a missile warning practice was underway. He continued to play the tuba for the entire 37 minutes. General Eisenhower personally signed a citation for his courageous action. Despite being severely ill with scarlet fever, he managed to play for 178 men on Christmas Eve of that year. Tragically, 16 of them lost their lives in the Battle of the Bulge days later. The church became his playhouse. He stunned the audience in his debut performance at the tender age of 8 by interjecting a 4-minute monologue in which he questioned God's silence during Herod's slaughter, even though he was intended to portray a shepherd. It shocked everyone. He had performed in more than 20 church plays by the time he was 12 years old. He recruited 7 black adolescents to appear in the town's inaugural integrated concert in 1943. Dozens of people departed the church, and his father's employment was jeopardized as a result of the severe response. However, Roberts persisted. Critics from the church were outraged when he portrayed Judas in 1944 as a confused rebel rather than an antagonist. As a protest of inequity, he reinterpreted the biblical parable, The Prodigal Son, for his last church performance. His first professional break came when a theater director heard him perform. Despite his outstanding exam results, he encountered immediate difficulties when enrolling at Georgia Tech 6 weeks later, in 1946. In addition to planning a nuclear weapons discussion, he disapproved of ROTC because, in his view, it encouraged mindless conformity. He went so far as to accuse the engineering department of disregarding ethics in a daring editorial he published in the school newspaper. His involvement with student organizations studying Marx and Einstein landed him under FBI investigation by April. Just 141 days after being labeled gifted but dangerous by one dean, Roberts departed. He clarified thereafter that he wasn't keen on constructing bridges, but rather wanted to know who had authority over them. Because of his skill as a musician, he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps that summer. He avoided direct involvement in battle by instead performing at more than 200 formal engagements as a member of the Marine Corps Band. On stage during Truman's presidency, he was within 7 feet from Winston Churchill. A commander who loved his style spared him from court-martial for performing jazz at a military inspection. In 1948, he left the Marines and went back to Georgia Tech. Despite his excellent mathematics scores, he abruptly quit following a contentious debate on engineers' place in society. He began his studies in philosophy in 1950 at the University of Maryland. He did very well in all of his humanities subjects there, but he purposefully did poorly in his scientific studies, making the leap to Hollywood for Pernell Roberts. Sophia Loren's cinematic debut was from 1958 to 1959. A major turning point in Pernell Roberts' early Hollywood career came in 1958, when he co-starred with rising star Anthony Perkins and international wonder Sophia Loren in the film Desire Under the Elms. Roberts, who played the role of Peter Katrine in the intense drama, benefited from this renowned chance, which was based on Eugene O'Neill's 1924 play. The picture was distributed by Paramount Pictures via Don Hartman Productions and was directed by Delbert Mann. The script was adapted by O'Neill and Irwin Shaw. Critics were divided on the picture, even though it had a stellar cast and had a literary history. Notable critics included Bosley Crowther of the New York Times, who infamously said of Burl Ives, "He looked more like a foxy grandpa with a pious black hat on his head than like a gaunt and tireless old toiler." The film was nominated for an Oscar for Best Black and White Cinematography, Daniel L. Pfapp, and received recognition at the 1959 Laurel Awards, but its modest domestic box office rentals of $1 million were disappointing. Typecasting in Western films starts. An ironic premonition of Roberts' career trajectory came in 1958 when he won a supporting role in The Sheep Man, co-starring with Hollywood legend Glenn Ford. A tangled connection between Roberts with the genre began with this Western film and would eventually disappoint his creative objectives while also elevating his image. Roberts gave his Western roles a unique seriousness as a classically educated actor who had previously portrayed Shakespeare on Broadway and received the Dramatic Desk Award for Best Actor in 1955 for his off-Broadway performance of Macbeth. Infusing his performances with subtle character development uncommon in the genre, his professional training in theater distinguished him from many of his peers. Roberts spent 1958 hopping from film sets to stage shows, having just finished Broadway runs in 1957's The Duchess of Malfi and The Taming of the Shrew. After that, she moved on to Hollywood endeavors. Critics pointed out that, although Roberts may have been typecast by Westerns, they also gave him his best part, highlighting the irony of his Western typecasting. He learned the ins and outs of Hollywood Western production on The Sheep Man, which exposed him to physically demanding scenes, long shoots in remote locations, and simplified dialogue in comparison to his Shakespearean background. He also made connections in the industry and established professional patterns, which led to his breakthrough opportunity in television the following year, working together on Ride Lonesome, Randolph Scott. Many reviewers believe Roberts's performance in Ride Lonesome, 1959, to be his best in a film. Alongside genre legend Randolph Scott, he played the role of the morally ambiguous bandit Sam Boone. This 73-minute Bud Boetticher Scott-directed Western, shot in breathtaking CinemaScope at Lone Pine beginning August 14, 1958, has been praised by fans as maybe the best of the Boetticher-Scott cycle. James Coburn made her film debut in the production, which also included a famous ensemble cast. Many praised Roberts for his nuanced performance as Boone. Critics agreed that he evokes every bit of sardonic humor, masculine charm, and fidelity to his own peculiar code that the screenplay permitted. Boetticher asked Burt Kennedy for permission to keep Boone alive after seeing Roberts's performance, even though Kennedy had originally meant for the character to die in Burt Kennedy's screenplay. The filmmaker said afterwards that he had intended to capture both endings, but had intentionally shot the one in which Roberts survives. The film's release happened at the same time that Roberts's reputation as a stage actor was on the rise, marking a turning point in his career as his skills in performing seamlessly transferred to the Western genre, demonstrating his ability to portray multi-layered characters even within formulaic roles. Victory and the struggle for originality. Roberts joined the cast of Bonanza in 1959 to portray Adam Cartwright. Given Roberts's extensive experience in the theater and NBC's high expectations, this was a major development. However, Roberts had already grown disillusioned by 1962, after just 3 years of the show. He was forthright about his desire to leave the program totally, saying, "I had to sign for a 6th year to get a raise, but now I would prefer to be out entirely." NBC, anxious to maintain its top-rated show, extended his agreement from 5 to 6 years. Their refusal to let him go was unwavering. An executive came clean about their feelings of duty, saying, "We were trying to deliver a neat package to a new sponsor, so I felt some." In contrast to the rowdier, younger Cartwrights, Roberts portrayed Adam, an intelligent, college-educated architect who is both calm and scholarly. Unfortunately, the role's original complexity and novelty soon faded. Despite being an adult, Adam continued to behave as if he needed his father's approval for every single thing. "I expected a highbrow performance, but all we got was a hollow sensation," Roberts remarked afterwards. "What we discussed never happened," he declared in 1962 when he was already sounding the alarm. He reached his breaking point in 1965 when he fought with the powers about the scripts, character development, and other things, as he put it. He later told a journalist, "The Bonanza situation was not the most fulfilling of my life. I was upset the minute I arrived for work. That's no way to live." He quit the company after being upset for so long. Although Bonanza catapulted him to stardom, he was never comfortable in the limelight. The abrupt recognition was unsettling. So for a while he focused on regional theater. Speaking about his time on Bonanza, he compared it to Isaac Stern performing with Lawrence Welk. Instead than seeking celebrity for its own sake, Roberts sought meaning. The show's format and shallow plot lines made him feel trapped. In 1963, he began to question, "Don't you think it's a little ridiculous that we three grown men need to get Dad's okay for everything?" He yearned for parts that would allow him to explore profound themes, but all he could do was repeat the same lines week after week. "It wore me down," he said, describing the mounting mental toll. Roberts' wrath was on full display on set, as he engaged in ongoing feuds with writers and producers. "I became resigned to serving out my time after challenging practically everything for the first 3 years of the program," he said. He loathed the rushed pace, with scripts coming in at the last minute and no time for practice or thinking extensively about the situations. He made sure everyone was aware that the method of operation was terrible. Although Roberts was characterized by producer David Dort as rebellious, outspoken, and aloof, Dort conceded that Roberts has skill and could elevate any situation. But Roberts stopped acting like things were going to get better by 1964. "I haven't changed a bit since the show started," he said. "No matter where I look, the father figure follows." Roberts, however, made no secret of the fact that she was also concerned about matters outside of the set. He advocated for civil rights using his celebrity status. From Selma to Montgomery, he marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1965. On the set of Bonanza, he battled hard against biased casting, joining luminaries like Joan Baez and Harry Belafonte. According to his relatives, he advocated for NBC to cast actual Asian and Native American performers, rather than white actors using makeup. Even more outrageously, he proposed a plot in which Adam Cartwright wed a Native American woman portrayed by a black actor. NBC promptly shot down the notion. Regardless of the network's opinion, Roberts persisted in his pursuit. No matter the cost, he would always do what was right. While still working as a television host, he decided to try something new. Roberts' folk album Come All Ye Fair and Tender Ladies was published by RCA Victor in 1963. He sung traditional folk songs like In the Pines and They Call the Wind Maria, revealing a gentler, more artistic side of himself. Music provided him with a break from acting on Bonanza, allowing him to be creative without the network interfering. Even though the record didn't sell millions, he was proud of it since it was authentic and reflective of his goals in life. Roberts, whose first love was performing, likewise sought methods to return to the stage. But his contract with NBC made this nearly difficult. He went completely bonkers since he couldn't take on any outside employment during production months. He mentioned that being unable to perform elsewhere as one of Bonanza's major issues. In 1963, he attempted to rebel by performing with Night of the Iguana, but the network was not pleased. Mentally, Pernell Roberts was worn out by the end of 1964. He had reached his breaking point after playing Adam Cartwright on Bonanza. He was devastated, not only disappointed. He felt artistically stifled despite his serious acting background, which included training in Shakespearean techniques and winning a Drama Desk Award. He claimed he stopped reading scripts since the part was so meaningless. Instead, he would just show up, have someone give him the lines, and then go home. He no longer placed any significance on it. On set, he was once spotted using a short pencil to scribble big black lines over his lines of speech. Instead of learning a speech by heart, he had his character read it from notes. Roberts had developed an attitude of subdued defiance. Roberts felt like an adult, stuck portraying a kid for the last 2 years of the program. He remarked afterwards, because his character never developed or altered. The moment that shocked Hollywood then arrived. For the 1965-66 season, NBC gave him a $693,000 paycheck, which included $10,500 each episode with full rerun residuals. It was one of the most lavish TV contracts of the decade. But Roberts just kept walking away, unfazed. They remained on the show, received pay hikes, and were all millionaires by 1970. Roberts shrugged in response to a question on the funds he forfeited. Money wasn't as important to him as creativity and morality. Thus, he claimed he didn't require much to sustain himself. Roberts joined Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the Selma to Montgomery March only weeks after filming his final Bonanza episode. Never one to seek praise, he had tirelessly worked for civil rights throughout his life. Standing on picket lines and addressing politicians, he demanded that NBC cease using white actors in ethnic roles. He went so far as to confront the network over the Indian episodes of Bonanza, which featured an all-white cast. Standing up for what's right was more important to Roberts than preserving her TV career. Things had already become nasty behind the scenes. He had been secretly and bitterly feuding with the producers since 1964. He said the program was too simplistic, that there wasn't enough diversity, and that the three grown men should not have to ask their father for permission for anything. His producer, David Dort, characterized him as defiant, and his co-star Lorne Greene as unprofessional. Roberts pushed back, erasing lines of conversation and attempting to inject what he perceived as insincere and childishness into the program. Even though it was too late, Dort eventually came to terms with his mistake and realized he failed to see Roberts's talent. Roberts had already departed, certain that television had transformed into a tool for promoting avarice and uniformity. He refused to participate because he thought it was stifling innovation. Captain Brassbound's Conversion, which starred Roberts and Ingrid Bergman, was Broadway's 1972 homecoming engagement for Roberts. It was an honor to have his performance lauded by a critic who had thought it would help his career move on from Bonanza. It failed, but it demonstrated that his charisma on stage had never faded. In a theatrical adaptation of Gone with the Wind the next year, he portrayed Rhett Butler. Critics placed the responsibility on the production team, not Roberts, for the show's failure. But the damage had already been done. This was only the latest in a series of disappointments after Bonanza. He gave a solid performance, but the initiatives he was a part of kept failing. In Hollywood's eyes, that proved he had departed in the wrong direction. But there were dissenting opinions. A rare moment of acclaim during a tough time came when Roberts was nominated for a Joseph Jefferson Award in 1973 for his performance in Welcome Home in Chicago. He continued to appear in guest parts on TV shows like Gunsmoke, Mannix, and The Odd Couple, but he felt that the business had abandoned him. He went on to quietly caution others, "Don't rock the boat like Pernell did." He was unable to get another series for a long time and eventually confessed that he was never given the opportunity to decline. He was clandestinely put on the blacklist after publicly criticizing television. The producers exploited him to teach a lesson. Listen up, or you'll wind up like Roberts. He had the option to be bitter, but he chose to heal instead. He returned to provincial theater, remote from Hollywood, and portrayed a wide range of roles, including Randall McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music. Roberts deemed these years financially vital despite their austerity. Never once did he express remorse for quitting Bonanza. Instead, he said he needed time to emotionally recover. One of the most successful television series of all time had Pernell Roberts depart. When he departed Bonanza in 1965, he was giving up a substantial salary, $60,000 each episode, or more than $500,000 in today's terms. He spent the following 14 years largely avoiding the limelight. Even though he had experience in the theater, few anticipated his return to television. Something happened at a charity event in October 1978 that altered that. His claim to fame as television's most famous quitter was a running joke. Frank Glicksman, one of the producers, was present. The bosses were taken aback by the audition that ensued from that joke. 20 years after making his initial appearance on Bonanza, on September 23, 1979, Trapper John M.D. had its debut. On its debut night, it attracted more than 28 million viewers. With a bang, Pernell was back. This time around, he was determined to make a statement. Unlike on Bonanza, he was given greater leeway in terms of script approval and scheduling. Beyond his role as a doctor, he was instrumental in developing the show's plot. He nearly declined an Emmy nomination in 1981 because he was opposed to artists competing. He reluctantly consented to go once he found out that medical schools were using the submitted episode in which his character performs on a political prisoner. On that particular night, roughly half of all TV viewers caught the show. Roberts gave the Southern Poverty Law Center his $25,000 advertising budget instead of running a flashy Emmy campaign. "Consider using this for actual conflicts rather than made-up ones," he said with the message. Jonathan Trapper, Ph.D., completed 7 complete seasons. Even when he left Bonanza, it remained. The 151-episode series concluded in 1986 as he had requested. Even though Bonanza had a larger audience during that time period, Trapper John managed to hold his own. Among the few presentations of its kind, it managed to attract viewers of all ages and walks of life. It generated $127.8 million in ad revenue, with Roberts pocketing about $4.5 million in profit. The character had to be more than a caricature, though, so it wasn't just about the cash. To demonstrate Trapper's transformation from a careless physician into a reflective leader, he urged the authors to delve into his background, particularly his time in the Vietnam War. For medical dramas of that era, that level of detail was unusual. Roberts quietly altered the regulations. It was unprecedented at the time, yet he chose his own team. He took a daring step by employing David Friedkin, a writer who had been placed on the Red Scare blacklist. Roberts refused to back down, even though it almost lost the show a key sponsor. He also pushed for a more diverse cast and crew, and the program delivered. Women and minorities made up over 40% of the directors, 5 times the average for the industry. He vowed to leave in 1981 unless a black recurrent character was created. Marcia Sinclair was cast as Nurse Shoup as a result. He was respectful to the team and organized weekly meetings where they could provide suggestions for changes. This increased efficiency, maintained morale, and decreased employee turnover. In fact, he instituted a method of profit sharing, with the crew receiving 2% of the syndication earnings. In 1984, he was asked to give a speech on it by the Television Academy. He continued to remain an activist even after making a triumphant return to television. He established a foundation to support artistic freedom and donated 25% of his salary to it. The Equal Rights Amendment efforts were based out of his home trailer. Studio executives were unhappy about it, but he was unconcerned. He utilized his script control to make the most daring episode to date. Trapper helping wounded Nicaraguan civilians after 7 TV stations refused to carry his shows due to his political views. Additionally, he instituted a program to provide training to disadvantaged youngsters. 14 of these individuals were invited to the set each year to receive paid production experience. The Directors Guild eventually welcomed a number of them as members. He was a complicated, quiet guy in his personal life. He had a total of 4 marriages. Jonathan, his only kid, was born to his first wife, a theater professor who was 15 years his senior. Among his subsequent marriages were one that spanned 20 years, another that occurred during a lunch break on Bonanza, and lastly, a profound intellectual bond with Professor Eleanor Criswell. Following their 1997 wedding, they remained a married couple until his passing. His son Jonathan's death in a motorbike accident in 1989, when he was 38 years old, was the worst moment of his life. For a long time, Roberts kept silent about it. His anguish transformed him to the point that he felt it was too profound to express. Following that, he avoided the limelight even more. and was pickier about the parts he took. Away from the clamor of stardom, he resided in Malibu. His house was adorned with literature, artwork by Native Americans, and breathtaking views of the ocean rather than accolades. He found solace there. He remained there after receiving the news of his pancreatic cancer diagnosis at the age of 79. He made no public comments and showed no need for pity. Instead, he lived out his final days with the respect and quiet afforded by his beloved Eleanor. At the age of 81, he passed away on January 24, 2010. Despite leaving the program first, he outlived everyone else and became the last surviving member of the original Bonanza cast. Hollywood fads, celebrity, and even the parts people had anticipated him to play couldn't keep him down for long.